What if everything you believed in was a lie? The home you built, the love you swore was real, the man you once trusted with your whole heart, what if it was all just an illusion? She had spent years convincing herself that the distance between them was temporary, that the late nights and missed dinners were just the cost of a busy life. But the truth had a way of creeping in, silent and merciless. A text message. A name she didn't recognize. A voice on the other end of the phone that didn't belong to her husband. Her world was about to shatter. And the worst part? She had no idea just how deep the betrayal ran. Stay. You're not ready for what comes next. Ivy Quinn had always believed in love, the kind that endured, the kind that built homes and families, the kind that survived sleepless nights and silent dinners. She had lived by that belief for years, convincing herself that the distance between her and Knox was just a phase, that one day, he would look at her the way he used to. Their house was beautiful. Elegant, pristine, just like the life they had crafted together. But lately, it felt more like a museum, cold, quiet, and full of memories that no longer felt real. Knox Wilder was everything a husband was supposed to be. Successful. Hard-working. A provider. He had built a thriving business, given Ivy and Lily a life of comfort. But somewhere along the way, the man she married had turned into a stranger. At first, it was subtle. He started working later, missing bedtime stories with Lily, barely touching the meals Ivy prepared. Then it became routine, missed calls, empty glances, the feeling of being alone even when he was in the same room. But Ivy held on. For Lily. For the life they had built. For the hope that one day, she would wake up and everything would be the way it was before. She had no idea that hope was the biggest lie of all. Because some marriages don't fall apart slowly. Some shatter in an instant. Ivy had always trusted Knox. Even when he came home late. Even when his kisses turned into nods, and conversations became one-word replies. Even when his cologne smelled different, like something unfamiliar. But trust has limits. One evening, as she cleared away the untouched dinner plates, a nagging feeling settled in her chest. Something wasn't right. Knox had texted hours ago, working late. Don't wait up. The same excuse. Again. Her eyes drifted to his phone, lying face down on the counter. Silent. No notifications. No missed calls. It was too clean, too perfect. A man like Knox, always on the phone, always talking business, yet his screen was nothing but a black void. Her pulse quickened as she moved to the office and opened the laptop he barely used. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, until she found it. A phone bill. Knox rarely called her anymore. But there was one number, repeated over and over. Late at night. Early in the morning. During the hours he was supposedly at work. Ivy's hands trembled as she dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, a voice, smooth, young, confident. A woman. Hello. Ivy's mouth went dry. She forced herself to speak. Who is this? A pause. Then, the woman let out a quiet, knowing laugh. Oh? You must be Ivy. The ground beneath her felt unsteady. Why is my husband calling you? Because he wants to. Because he chooses to. The woman's tone dripped with amusement, as if the pain in Ivy's voice meant nothing. Listen, sweetheart. I don't care about you. Knox picked me. Not you. The line went dead. Ivy stood frozen, the phone slipping from her fingers, crashing against the floor. The sound barely registered. Her world had just shattered. And yet, deep inside, she still wanted to believe there was a chance Knox would deny it. That this was all some cruel mistake. That the man she had built a life with wasn't capable of this kind of betrayal. But the truth was about to destroy her. The night Ivy confronted Knox, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one brewing between them. He had just walked in, reeking of expensive whiskey and someone else's perfume. Ivy stood in the middle of the living room, her face pale, her hands curled into fists at her sides. "Who is she?" Her voice was steady, but the weight of her pain seeped through every word. Knox didn't even flinch. He tossed his keys onto the counter, loosened his tie, and exhaled like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. "I don't want to do this right now, Ivy." But she was done waiting. Done pretending. "You don't get to walk away this time." She stepped forward, eyes burning with a fury she had never felt before. "Either you end this, or you lose everything. You choose, our family, or her." Knox's laughter was cold. Cruel. "You still don't get it, do you?" His blue eyes locked onto hers, filled with something unreadable. "There is no family, Ivy." Then, the words that shattered her world beyond repair. "Lily isn't my daughter." The room tilted. The air vanished. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely there. Knox stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "She was never mine. And the worst part, you didn't even know." Ivy's knees nearly gave out beneath her. No. No, that's not possible. That's not true." She clutched onto the only thing keeping her upright, the belief that this was a lie. A twisted, bitter attack meant to hurt her. "You're lying." The words barely made it past her lips. "You're just trying to punish me." Knox's jaw clenched. "Am I?" There was something about the way he said it, so sure, so final, that sent an icy dread creeping down her spine. Because deep down, a terrible thought was forming. What if he wasn't lying? What if the man she had loved, married, built a life with, had known something she never had? That night, as Knox slept in the guest room like he hadn't just destroyed her entire reality, Ivy sat in the darkness of their bedroom, her fingers tightening around her phone. There was only one way to know for sure. A DNA test. The 2 weeks that followed were hell. Ivy moved like a ghost through her own life, smiling for Lily, holding her close, pretending everything was normal, while inside, she was unraveling. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday morning. It felt heavier than paper had any right to be. She sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the sound of the world around her. Her hands trembled as she peeled the envelope open. One glance. That was all it took. Knox was not Lily's father. Ivy pressed a hand over her mouth, a choked sob escaping her throat. Memories crashed over her like a tidal wave. 6 years ago. The man before Knox. A brief, fleeting moment from a life that had felt like a different world. And now, she understood the most horrifying part. Knox had known. He had known for years. And instead of telling her, instead of facing it, he had chosen to make her suffer. The betrayal burned hotter than ever before. And this time, she wasn't going to let him win. The revelation of Lily's DNA test was a wound that refused to close. But the deeper Ivy dug, the more she realized, the true betrayal had started long before she ever suspected. She needed answers. And this time, Knox would give them to her. "When did you know?" Ivy's voice was eerily calm, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. She stood in their dimly lit living room, the DNA results clenched in her trembling hands. Knox sat on the couch, rolling a tumbler of whiskey between his fingers. He didn't look at her. "What does it matter?" His tone was flat. Detached. Ivy's nails dug into her palm. How long, Knox? A slow exhale. Then, without emotion, he answered. Since Lily was 2. The air in Ivy's lungs turned to ice. 2. Her voice cracked. You've known for 3 years. Knox's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Long enough to watch you play happy family. Long enough to wonder if you ever planned on telling me the truth. Ivy's hands shook. I didn't know. Finally, Knox looked at her, really looked at her. And for a brief second, she thought she saw something human in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it came. That's the worst part, isn't it? He murmured. You didn't even know who the father of your child was. And I had to find out on my own. The realization hit her like a freight train. Knox had done a DNA test behind her back. He had lived with this secret for years. And instead of confronting her, instead of trying to fix what was broken, he had chosen revenge. That's why you did it, isn't it? Ivy's voice wavered, the pieces falling into place. That's why you cheated. You wanted to punish me. Knox didn't deny it. He leaned back, swirling his drink. I wanted you to hurt like I did. I wanted you to know what it felt like to have everything you believed in turn to ash. Ivy stared at him, her stomach twisting in disgust. So you spent years lying to me. Sleeping beside me, kissing me, raising Lily, only to destroy me in the end. Knox's jaw tightened. I raised a child that wasn't mine. Ivy's voice was razor sharp. You don't get to use Lily as an excuse for what you did. Silence stretched between them. A heavy, suffocating weight. And then, the past came crashing down. 6 years ago. A different life. Ivy had been young, reckless, searching for something she couldn't name. She remembered him, a man who had drifted in and out of her world like a fleeting dream. Their time together had been brief, a mistake wrapped in temporary comfort. Then came Knox. Steady, dependable. The man who had saved her from herself. She had loved him. Truly. And when she found out she was pregnant, she never questioned it. She had never doubted that Lily was his. But she had been wrong. And now, she was paying the price. Ivy looked at Knox, the man she had once trusted with her heart. And all she saw was a stranger. I made a mistake. Her voice was barely a whisper. But what you did? That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Knox's expression flickered, guilt. Anger. She couldn't tell anymore. You destroyed us, she said, stepping back. And you don't even regret it. Knox downed the rest of his drink, and set the glass down with a hollow thud. No, Ivy. His voice was low, final. You destroyed us the day you brought home someone else's child. Her breath caught. The final nail in the coffin. She had nothing left to say. Because there was nothing left to save. The house that once held laughter now felt like a cage. But Ivy was no longer a prisoner. 4 days, she had moved in silence, but not in surrender. She had watched Knox, studied his patterns, learned when he was distracted, when he would be gone. And when he left for another one of his so-called business trips, she acted. She dug through his things. Bank statements, hotel reservations, messages he thought he had erased. The evidence was everywhere, hidden in plain sight, as if he had never feared getting caught. But he had underestimated her. With every screenshot, every printed document, every recorded phone call, Ivy built her case. She wasn't just leaving. She was making sure he could never control her again. The lawyer was blunt. You have enough to file for divorce on grounds of adultery. If we play this right, you can get full custody of Lily. Ivy's heart clenched. That was all she needed to hear. Do it. The papers were drafted. The signatures were ready. And when Knox came home, expecting the same broken woman he had grown accustomed to, he found someone else entirely. Knox walked through the door like he owned the world. He tossed his keys onto the counter, barely sparing Ivy a glance. "Lily asleep?" he asked, unbuttoning his cufflinks. Ivy stood in the center of the living room, her fingers gripping a manila folder. "I know about everything." Knox froze. His expression flickered, annoyance, mild interest. He turned to her, arms crossed. "I don't have time for your dramatics, Ivy." She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply placed the folder onto the coffee table and slid it toward him. "Sign them." Knox frowned, his gaze dropping to the papers. "Divorce. Custody. Settlement." His jaw clenched. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." A dark chuckle escaped his lips. "You think you can just walk away?" Ivy tilted her head. "That's exactly what I'm doing." Knox grabbed the papers and flipped through them, his amusement fading with every page. "You really thought you could win this?" he scoffed, tossing the documents aside. "You think the courts will just hand you everything?" Ivy met his gaze with a quiet, steady fire. "I don't think, Knox. I know." Something in her voice made him hesitate. "You were careful," she continued, "but not careful enough. I have bank statements, receipts, witnesses. I have a lawyer who's ready to make sure you walk away with nothing." His hands curled into fists. "You." "No, Knox." Ivy stepped closer, her voice cutting through his anger like a blade. "You don't get to be angry. You don't get to act like the victim. You knew the truth about Lily for years, but instead of talking to me, instead of facing it like a man, you spent those years trying to destroy me." Knox's breathing was uneven now, his confidence cracking. "Ivy." "No." Her voice was sharp, unwavering. "You don't love me. You never did. If you did, you wouldn't have chosen revenge over honesty." A bitter silence filled the room. Knox had expected rage, tears, begging. But this was the one thing he never thought he'd see. Ivy Quinn, unafraid. She picked up the divorce papers and pressed them against his chest. "Sign them, or I'll make sure you lose more than just your family." Knox stared at her, his world shifting beneath his feet. For the first time since this all began, he realized he wasn't the one leaving her. She was leaving him. The divorce was finalized within months. Knox fought at first, dragging out negotiations, trying to intimidate her. But Ivy stood firm. Every time he tried to manipulate, threaten, or guilt-trip her, she met him with cold, calculated resolve. And in the end, the judge ruled in her favor. She got full custody of Lily. She kept the house, the car, everything she needed to rebuild her life. But more than that, she walked away with something Knox could never take from her again. Her freedom. The first morning in her new life, Ivy woke up to the smell of pancakes. "Mommy." Lily came barreling into the room, her little feet thumping against the wooden floors. Ivy scooped her up, pressing kisses all over her face as Lily giggled. For the first time in years, Ivy felt light. No more watching the clock, waiting for Knox to come home. No more sleepless nights spent wondering if she wasn't enough. No more walking on eggshells in her own home. She was free. And she was going to make damn sure Lily knew what it meant to be loved unconditionally. Knox underestimated how much he would lose. At first, he tried to act like the divorce was her loss. Like he was the one who got away. But when the dust settled, reality hit him hard. His affair didn't last. The thrill faded, and the woman he had sacrificed his marriage for moved on without a second thought. His home, the place he once took for granted, was gone. He now lived in a soulless high-rise, where silence stretched long and empty. But worst of all, Lily no longer ran to the door calling his name. She no longer looked at him with wide, adoring eyes. She was slipping away, and for the first time, Knox felt something he never expected. Regret. But it was too late. He had chosen revenge over love. And now, he had nothing. One day, an unexpected letter arrived. Ivy hesitated before opening it, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded the crisp paper. It was from him. The man she had been with before Knox. The man she had never thought about after their brief time together. He had found out about Lily. And he wanted to meet her. Ivy sat in silence for a long time, staring at the words. She could rip the letter apart. Pretend it never arrived. Keep Lily's life exactly as it was. Or she could open a door she never expected. Ivy exhaled slowly, her mind racing. Lily deserved love. Not from a man who saw her as a betrayal. But maybe, just maybe, from someone who had never even known she existed. And so, for the first time in years, Ivy allowed herself to consider a new possibility. A new beginning. A future no longer defined by the past. The truth can shatter illusions and break hearts, but hiding it only prolongs the inevitable destruction. Knox knew the truth for years, yet instead of facing it, he let resentment rot away everything good in his life. In the end, it wasn't the truth that ruined him, it was his refusal to deal with it. Cheating is not an act of strength or justice. It's weakness wrapped in self-indulgence. Knox thought his affair was a punishment for Ivy's unintentional betrayal, but in reality, it was just his cowardly way of avoiding his own pain. Instead of finding closure, he lost everything that mattered. Ivy was not perfect. She made mistakes. But what made her strong was her ability to face them, learn from them, and move forward. She didn't stay broken. She didn't let guilt define her. Instead, she chose to rebuild, to fight for her happiness, and to show Lily what true strength looks like. In the end, this story is not about betrayal or revenge. It's about resilience. It's about breaking free from toxic cycles. It's about choosing yourself, even when the world tries to convince you that you're not enough. Because in the end, strength isn't measured by how much pain you endure. It's measured by how fearlessly you walk away from what no longer serves you.